All right, everybody, it's time for another sprint zone. This one's for 418, and it's a good one. Special thanks to Ben Nelson for providing his power, along with Scott, and along with, of course, myself. The ride starts off pretty good, and looking back, we are pretty much in a reasonably ordered pace line, and at this point, the speed is starting to ramp up. Going up County Road 5 at like 22, 23 miles an hour, and the group's starting to walk away. And at this point, I'm going to go to the front and pull the reins on this one because people are just getting a little too carried away. I assert my dominance and beg the riders up front to slow down. With that being said, this is pretty much a thing of beauty. Look at this nice double pace line. This is sweet. Riders up front, two by two. This is exactly what I like to see. Coming down through the riders, it's like perfection. This looks like a pro peloton. I start to slot in, and then I kind of look behind me, and well, although it's not horrible, it's a little janky, honestly. I don't know if people are afraid to ride, and this is Matt back here. Who doesn't want to ride next to Matt? He's a super nice guy, but looking up front, we see the perfection that I like to see on the ride. A lot of the other groups, and if you're racing, you can have a bunch where you're not lined up, but this is for two reasons. Number one, for safety. If you do happen to overlap with somebody, you're not going to bump into them because your handlebars are next to each other. You're not going to go down. No overlapping wheels, no problem. And two, you get a chance to know your neighbor. Let's keep in mind that this is, in fact, a social ride. You may get some training out of it, but I'd like to ask you folks, who's chatting with their neighbors? Who's met somebody new on this ride? Eh? If you can't answer that you talked to somebody new on some of these rides, then we've got a problem. Regardless, things are looking good, and I'm kind of inspecting the quality of the new camera. It's a little dark, and I think I'm going to have to make some color corrections maybe in the next couple of videos, as in some of the still frames, and Brian pointed out, one of the new guys, that in one of the stills you really couldn't see his face, it was all shadowed out. And yeah, that's true. The saturation just seems to be a little bit off, but I know I can do this, fix this in color correction, and I hope to bring better results in upcoming weeks. But so far, I'm super happy with the camera because it captures pretty much the entire ride. The inclusion of the camera, of course, was for safety initially. So if any cars got kind of crazy, we'd have license plates, witnesses, and there wouldn't be any he said, she said. It'd be like, what does the camera show? That being said, once again, I'd like to acknowledge the submission of Ben Nelson with his power numbers and Scott. So on the upper rows are the instantaneous power, and on the lower rows are the 30-second power, which I find very interesting. So I've been including that in some of the recent videos. Making the corner, and as per the rules of engagement, and we've been breaking some of these, is that the engagement, the melee, doesn't officially begin until everyone is around the corner. On sprints number 2, when we make that left-hander, people are just going for it, not waiting for everyone to get around. And with groups this size, around 20, there's a huge advantage, and people could check out. So let's remember, it is much more fun to ride somebody off your wheel than to drop them just because you want to win. If you want to do that and you want some kind of like questionable tactics, you can go ride some of these other rides where like all they care about is like winning. That being said, getting back to the contest. The game is almost afoot, 18 miles an hour, pretty good tailwind, everyone's together, and people don't really want to do much of anything. And you kind of look at my watch, 115, 120. This is pretty pedestrian. And I know what's going on here. People want to hang on as long as possible. So if they keep it slow at the beginning, they have chances to hang on. And I get that. It's a good tactic, but it's not what I'm here for. I'm here for a little work. I'm here to test the mettle of my fellow riders, work on some tactics, have some fun, stretch a little bit, and wear out the legs of those who would rip them off if not given the chance to cause a little harm. So we're up the hill, and I do kind of miss the wicked S turns because that used to be the old excuse for why people weren't going to go slow or wanted to go slow. But this is kind of nice too. It kind of keeps the group together and it does give us the opportunity to ride off the wheel. Oh, and there's Mr. Nelson now wanting to get the party started. And we are off. And there's no reaction from the group. And is this either because he's such a badass that they know that unless Byron comes up, we've got no chance of catching him? Regardless, I've seen the whole thing from weeks before where Mr. Mellinger and Mr. Nelson went off the front. They got a good gap, but I don't want that to happen again. So I tried to make the bridge, but Ben's kind of waiting. He's a nice guy. And if you want to talk about power differentials, and we can use some of the Zwift categories, Ben's an A rider on Zwift. I'm a C rider on Zwift. That means I'm like 2.8 watts per kilogram on a good day. Ben's probably closer to 5 watts per kilogram. And really, there's not much of a chance. But looking at our wattages now, Ben's up front, pushing over 400 watts. I'm in there in the 200s. Looking at our 30-second power, Ben's well under the 300s and starting to stretch things out. And the game is afoot at this point. Danny Evans quick to attack, and you can see how the would-be those that are behind waiting for Christmas or Santa Claus to grant them passage to the selection have lost out. And the men that are going to decide this are pretty much in this group, with the exception of Byron, of course, who's back there doing his thing. And we'll see more of him later. Anyway, I let Ben kind of go, kind of sag back, because the draft is much better behind, and we'll let some of the other riders do the work. Got Mr. Lawyer here. We got Matt from the Fort Collins Cycling Club representing. And we got Scott up there, and there's an attack going on. It's Ben attacking, and it looks like it might be Tom, who's a relatively newcomer to the group, up there keeping Ben honest and sitting on his wheel. Look at some of these wattages here. We are going hard, and I am going anaerobic, and I'm trying to recover. Just that little, what can I say, effort to catch Ben early on, it cost. Versus if there was somebody like a super to bring us up slowly. So my matches are just being like just shelled here. Everyone's in tow. Mr. Evans looking good, and you can see people swinging in the back, barely hanging on here. And Ben, look, comfortable. Now, having a conversation with Scott, Scott's back there laughing because he's seeing Ben toying with us. And I don't think Ben's really toying with us. I think Ben is trying to draw out a selection to have some people to play with and to see what he can do. Because it is much better to have a selection of strong men, a safe pack, than to have 20 people all ramming and a thumping would-be contenders back there trying to ride above their station. So this is a little rise, hard to see on the screen, but those who know it well. Tom up front, looking strong, stringing things out. Ben saying, who's going to come? Who's going to come? And this is what the strength of an A rider can do. I'm pushing 270 watts or more just to stay on the wheel, and I'm not even on the wheel. At this point, Ben is like, okay, it's go time. I'm going to see if I can drop these fools. Either they're waiting to sit on my wheel, but let's see what they really have. And this draws people out. Danny Evans making a jump, trying to go forward, but realizes that is not going to happen. Too little, too late, and we're forming a chase posse. Slight little echelon, and things are looking pretty good here. Looking at Scott's power, 216. Good work there. I'm at the front now, echeloned out. And people are working well together. 26 miles an hour. And you can see up the road, Ben and Tom have checked out. And and this can happen if one rests and doesn't put in a lot of effort, they'll have plenty of matches for things. And I would have needed that to have been able to sit on Ben's wheel. Regardless, I'm barely hanging on here, and we see the three riders just going for it. Mr. Lawyer, and at this point, he's going too hard. If he wanted to keep this posse together, he needs to bring it up to an effort that everybody can hold on to at the same time. But he's going too hard. Look at Matt here suffering, struggling in the wind, falling off the pace. I'm suffering and struggling. And I should apologize for the camera work. I didn't do enough of the proper rendering here. We saw a lot of field work, but we can see Matt being shelled, but a strong representation from the Fort Collins Cycling Club, where they think that these guys that they're B riders. And I got to tell them, all the guys in the Fort Collins Cycling Club, they are A riders. They have all advanced together, and they haven't labeled their ride A yet. But of course, I digress. And what do we have here? We have Byron, aka Superman, ripping through us. And we're at this point doing 24 miles an hour. Byron had given me his telemetry. He only had heart rate and speed, so I didn't include that to re-render this. But he came by at 27 miles an hour when we were doing 24. Tried to hang on to this, tried as hard as I could, but it was too little too late. You can see there the accelerations where my wattage got up over 400 watts. Too little too late. And what do we have here? Blown up riders that had gone too hard. Basically, divide and conquer is what happened. And I'm certain if Ben could see this, well, he's seeing this now. This is what he did. Had we all stayed together, we might have had enough to get on Byron's wheel and maybe have hope to bring these people back. But nope, nope. Look at us, blown up. And this is what happens when people don't work together. Anyway, continuing on, trying to do the best that we can. And I figure I should at least make a good showing of the whole thing. Going as hard as I can, trying to keep people honest. Looks like Mr. Evans and Scott back there going pretty hard. Really happy I put the deep dish wheels on today because I really wasn't going to, but I'm like, yeah, I think it was worth it. And the wind wasn't that bad. Looking up the road, everybody has checked out, and a good time was had by all. Definitely a different type of sprint zone than we saw in the years before the supers arrived. I feel like I'm doing like a superhero movie where before Batman, Superman, Green Lantern, Iron Man, etc., pick your universe, DC or Marvel, people would have to own it. But now it's we can have the supers pull us along, etc. So here's the turnaround point where there were some folks turning in front of cars. And at this point, there really wasn't an issue. Everyone turns around pretty nicely, um, except for, you know, they're turning in front of cars, and people need to be kind of aware that we don't want to do that. I mean, this wasn't horrible. I think I like the idea of turning around slowly, but we've got to really, 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 really be careful that if there's a car behind us, please be aware and don't turn around. So I think this is an example. Like the rider up front, you see, makes that U-turn in front of that car. I'm certain that they were not expecting that. And it wouldn't have taken much for that rider to have waited for that car to pass. I don't know if people are wearing mirrors these days. I've got a little radar unit, so it tells me, or I look back. But pretty much that's all I got to say on that. And here's a little bit of the recovery. We're regrouping instead of stopping, I think this is good for those people who hang it out. It's good to go hard and recover versus trying to keep the tempo up. Because if you really want to do that, you can go do TTH or do one of the other rides that does that. This allows people to recover and feel like they are not the whipping boy. Getting organized finally. Good ride. I enjoyed this one. And once again, thanks to everyone who shared their telemetry and signed the disclaimer that they can be on this video. Oh, and there's Isla, who doesn't watch these videos. So I said I was going to talk about her, something bad about her. Wheel sucker, Isla. So hopefully somebody will tell her that I like called her names, and she will mention it on the next ride, or maybe watch the video. Anyway, thanks all. Peace.